Alright, video creators and editors, are you ready to finally become an informed monitor buyer? Well, you've come to the right place. So I recently picked up these two new computer monitors to upgrade my video editing setup, and I went down the rabbit hole of doing all kinds of research. I spent weeks researching everything that's important to have in a monitor for video editing so that you don't have to. And all that important information that you're gonna need to know before you buy a monitor for video editing is gonna be in this video. I run my video agency full time and I've been making videos for about 10 years now. So I understand how frustrating it is to edit on the wrong type of monitor. In this video editing monitor buying guide, we're gonna go over everything that you need to look out for specifically when buying a monitor for video editing, so that way you don't waste any of your hard-earned money and you can make the best decision possible for your specific needs. Unless you like wasting your money, in which case you don't need to watch this video. I'm gonna try to keep this video as simple as possible and try not to be overly technical when talking about video editing monitor features and specs. So let's get into it. Alright, so one of the most important things to consider when buying a monitor for video editing is going to be the panel type. And there's all kinds of different panels out there. However, there are four main panel types that we're going to talk about in this video: TN, VA, IPS, and OLED. TN, or twisted pneumatic, I don't know, however you say it, panels are going to be the cheapest option out there, but their technology is outdated for many reasons at this point. So for the sake of keeping it simple, just avoid TN panels. I'm going to be mainly focusing on the three other types of panels in this video. So next there's VA panels, or vertical alignment panels. You'll want to avoid vertical alignment monitors in my opinion because their colors can be inconsistent from different viewing angles. And that's going to create problems for color grading and collaborating in person, because if one person's looking at it from one angle, they might see different colors compared to someone who's looking at it from another angle. So for the money, there are much better options out there for video editing. VA monitors can also be prone to backlight bleeding, which can create bright spots and dark spots in different places on the monitor. And again, that's really not going to be ideal for color grading. However, they are one of the cheapest panel types out there, and they offer better contrast ratios compared to IPS and TN panels. Alright, so now let's talk about the IPS panel type. IPS stands for in-plane switching. IPS monitors are a great option, and they can also be very affordable. In my opinion, they can be very reliable, color accurate, and produce a consistent image across different viewing angles. They're also going to be a lot cheaper than OLED panels. However, you're going to need to know that because of the way the IPS panels are made, they do have worse contrast ratios compared to OLED and VA panels. Last up is the notorious OLED panel, or organic light emitting diode panel. Now these monitors will rinse your pockets, but it's for a good reason. Most notably, true blacks. To explain this simply, IPS, TN, and VA panels don't actually display true black because the backlight actually never turns off. The only thing that's happening is that the liquid crystal in the display is blocking the light from passing when it's displaying a black pixel. An OLED panel will shut off the black pixels, displaying a true black because there is no light. And that's what black is, just the absence of light. OLED panels come in a wide variety of color spaces, gamuts, bit depths, and with the ability to display true blacks, giving them the highest contrast ratio there is. So you may be thinking that, well, yeah, OLED's probably the best option to go with, and you're not wrong, but there are two downsides that you need to consider, and these downsides are pretty big. OLED monitors usually are just not as bright as IPS or VA monitors. That means if you're editing in a bright environment, like with the window open, it's daytime, then you're going to run into some issues seeing the image on screen. Also, OLED panels are notorious for having issues with burn-in. Burn-in is when an image is permanently burned into the screen, and that happens when the same image is left on screen for long periods of time. When video editing, you would typically be leaving the same image on screen for a long period of time, for example, in your editing software. While the image in the viewport might be changing because you're editing stuff, the UI of the software stays in the same spot on the screen. Those are just a few things to consider. In my opinion, if you have the budget, go for an OLED because a lot of those issues are solved by some of the higher end OLED monitors. But if not, then definitely consider IPS. Just because they don't offer as great of a contrast ratio, that's really the only downside in my opinion. Now, aside from the panel type, in my opinion, again, it's just my opinion. Don't throw me in jail for this. The most important thing to consider when buying a monitor for video editing is the color space and color capabilities of the monitor and panel that you're using. Here's what you need to know. Color space is pretty much just how many colors the monitor can display. For video editing, you're ideally going to want a monitor that can display 99 to 100% of the sRGB color space. Also 100% of the Rec. 709 color space, but this is only relevant if you're making videos for the internet. Most cell phones and computer monitors can only display an sRGB color space image anyways. It's pretty much a universal standard. If you edit and export videos for cinema, for example, like your content's going to be played in a movie theater, then you're going to want a monitor that can display a larger color space like DCI-P3 or Rec 2020. If you're kind of confused about color spaces, I know I was, then here's an easy way to understand it. If the human eye can see 100% of the visible light spectrum, sRGB only covers about 35% of the visible light spectrum. But don't freak out because, like I said, all monitors, laptops, and cell phones are displaying the image at sRGB anyways. And whenever you upload your video to the internet, let's say on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, the color space of the video you exported, regardless of how you export it, will always be converted back to sRGB anyways. Then there's DCI-P3, which covers about 45% of the visible light spectrum. Rec 2020 is massive and covers about 76% of the visible light spectrum. So if you shot your footage in a very large color space, but your monitor can only display, let's say, 100% sRGB, then you're not actually going to be able to see or edit the colors as they were captured from your camera, unless you're going to convert that footage to sRGB or Rec 709. sRGB and Rec 709 are very close together. They're pretty similar, not quite the same, but pretty close. For some video editors, if you're delivering your footage in a larger color space like DCI-P3 or Rec 2020, then you're going to need a monitor that can display those colors. Just a heads up though, get ready to drop some serious cash for that. But larger color spaces like DCI-P3 and Rec 2020 are not very common for non-cinema related work. So unless you know you need it, you don't really need it. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. If you're like me and you make videos for the internet, then 99 to 100% sRGB and Rec 709 is all you're gonna need. If you know that your content is gonna be delivered and viewed in DCI-P3 or any of the larger color spaces, then you're gonna wanna make sure that your monitor can display that so you're color grading accurately. Now I know that's a lot of information to take in, but we're not done yet. We still gotta talk about bit depth. So if color space is about how many colors the monitor can produce, bit depth is about how many shades of each color can the monitor produce. If you're typically working with high bit depth footage, then you're going to want a monitor that can display that high bit depth image. If you're editing on a monitor that's low bit depth, you might notice banding in areas of the image wherever there's a gradient. So even though, for example, an image lives within the sRGB color space and it can display all these different hues within that color space, an 8-bit monitor can display 256 different shades per channel. So that being red, green, and blue. 256 shades of red, 256 shades of blue, 256 shades of green, whereas a 10-bit monitor can display 1024 shades of each subpixel, red, green, and blue. And that's a lot more colors. 16.7 million colors for an 8-bit monitor, and 1.07 billion colors for a 10-bit monitor. So if you're capturing and editing 10-bit footage, you're gonna want a monitor that can display 10-bit color. However, there are some 8-bit monitors that can cheat this. They use a technique called FRC, or frame rate control. An 8-bit monitor with FRC can display a 10-bit image despite only being 8-bit. It works by rapidly cycling between two shades of a color to give the illusion of an intermediate color. It's not the same as having a true 10-bit monitor, but if budget is of a concern to you, then going with an 8-bit monitor that has FRC is still a good option. If you're uploading videos to the internet for social media, they're going to convert any 10-bit footage into 8-bit anyways. So ideally, you're going to want to look for a monitor that's capable of at least displaying a 10-bit image for accurate color grading. If a 10-bit monitor is out of your budget range, then go for an 8-bit monitor with FRC. Now I know at this point you might feel like you have all the knowledge and the power to go buy a monitor and conquer the world. But hang on, we're not done yet. There are a few more important specs that you need to consider. If you plan on buying a monitor for video editing, then the resolution and screen size of the monitor are important factors as well. In my opinion, you're going to want a monitor that's at least UHD 4K resolution because that's becoming the new standard over 1080p and even 1440p. UHD 4K is 3840 by 2160 pixels. It's just a good measure to future-proof your monitor. Also, if you're capturing a 4K image and you're editing a 4K image, you're going to want a 4K monitor. This way you can color grade and edit that footage as accurately as possible. It also just looks so much better, and you'll feel even more proud of the footage that you capture when you see it in all of its glory in 4K. Now let's talk about the screen size. When editing a video, the worst thing is when you can't view the image because it's too small in the viewport. So I would recommend going with at least a 27-inch monitor to make sure that you have enough screen real estate to edit comfortably. But another thing to consider is the size to resolution ratio, also known as pixel density or PPI, pixels per inch. For example, a 24-inch monitor at 1080p will look a lot less pixelated then a 32-inch monitor also at 1080p. So when you're going out to buy a new monitor for video editing, get one that has a pixel density of at least 110 ppi. This way your image doesn't look too pixelated. Now, video editors don't always consider these important computer monitor specs, but they're crucial for editing videos professionally. The viewing angle of your monitor matters. Get a monitor with at least a 178 degrees viewing angle. This is going to make sure that no matter which angle you're viewing your monitor from, you're going to see consistent colors across the screen. The viewing angle is also an important thing to consider if you plan on doing any in-person collaborative video editing work. You can also go for a monitor that supports high dynamic range like HDR10 or Dolby Vision, but only if you know that you need it. To create an HDR video, you need to shoot, edit, export, and display the video in HDR. And that's a very different process compared to making a regular video. But you can also get a monitor that supports HDR, so at least you have the option in case you decide that you do want to make some sort of HDR content. If you're shopping around for a monitor, you've probably seen all sorts of gaming monitors out there that look like really good options. And they can be, you just need to make sure that they have the right specs like we talked about in this video. But gaming monitors have some specs that will jack up the price without providing any real value to video editors. For example, the refresh rate of your monitor doesn't really matter for video editing. A 60Hz monitor is more than enough for video editing because rarely are you ever going to play back your footage at 60 frames per second. Even if you shot it in 60 frames per second, you're always going to end up slowing it down to 24 or 30 frames per second. I've been making videos for, like I said, over 10 years, and I've not once ever had to deliver a video that was higher than 30 frames per second. But for gaming, you would typically want a monitor that has a high refresh rate because this can give you a competitive advantage whenever you're gaming. Also, color accuracy is much more important for video editing than it is for gaming. Whenever you're color correcting your footage, you want those colors to be as true to life as possible. Clients don't really appreciate when you mess up their skin tones or the color of their products. But for gaming, who cares if the colors are slightly off? So ideally, you would want a monitor that's made for creators and not gamers, but if you had to choose a gaming monitor, at least make sure that it has some of the specs that we talked about in this video. Now we're almost done, but there's one last thing I need to mention. Regardless of the monitor you have, you're gonna need to color calibrate that monitor. This is because if your monitor isn't color calibrated, you're gonna edit the image on screen to look good on your monitor. But in reality, you might be overcorrecting or undercorrecting some of those colors. So whenever you go to export and deliver the video, it's going to look totally different on one display compared to your monitor. For example, if your monitor is slightly tinted magenta, you're going to try to balance that out by adding some more green into the image. So on your monitor, it looks like you color corrected the footage, but then when you go to view it on your phone, now it looks way too green. That's because you overcompensated for the magenta tint of your monitor. Some monitors do come color calibrated straight from the manufacturer, like the Asus Pro Art series, but there could still be some slight inaccuracies. Also, any monitor over time will lose its calibration and will need to be recalibrated. You can reference your iPhone and try to match your screen to your iPhone, or there's also more expensive but accurate ways of color calibrating your monitor, like buying the Data Color Spider X. Just make sure that you're recalibrating your monitor every so often. So in my opinion, here's what you should aim for when buying a monitor for video editing if you create most of your videos for the internet. If you have the budget, go for a monitor that is 27 inches or larger at UHD 4K. You can go for an IPS or an OLED panel, those are going to be great options. Just make sure that they're capable of displaying 100% of the sRGB color space and they're at least 10-bit or 8-bit with frame rate control. But if you're stuck between choosing a monitor that is higher resolution or a monitor that has a larger color space, I would prioritize the color space and bit depth over the resolution and size of the monitor. Well, by now you should be a video editing monitor expert equipped with the knowledge to not waste any of your time or money. But there's no point in buying a high quality video editing monitor if the footage you're capturing sucks. So check out this other video I made that's going to show you how to capture high quality footage regardless of the camera that you're using. Alright, thanks for watching guys.